in the v1 folder for the version 1, I have a file called endpoints.js. And if you open up that file, you see all of the endpoints for my API. So what I've got here is I have the endpoints object, and onto that object I basically add other objects with all the basic information for the routing. And in the end I module.export it. So in the index.js file, I iterate over that object and checks, I fetch the endpoints, and then I check if there is any middleware on it, and if there is, I run it. And if it's not, I just run the handler. So if you want to define an endpoint, you can just copy one that looks like this. For example, if we test this out, well, we can call it test. And then you specify the URL that you want to use, and you should always prefix it with a version. So as this is version 1, it will be prefixed by v1, or we can call it test. And here you specify which method it will be, and we want to use a get method for simplicity. And in this array you specify if you want any middleware. We'll keep that empty as for now. And then you give it a description. So we type, this is just a test. In the expected input, you define which kind of input it'll expect. So this takes none. And the expected output of this endpoint is text saying hello. And then you can type which handler it uses. We can remove that parameter for now. And also here you have what you define the handler in here. So for example, I copied this from register. So you can see that this handler is required up here, and then I use the register function. But for simplicity, we can define a anonymous function like this. And you shouldn't have your logic in here, of course, but for simplicity. So I got my request and response object, and then I can just echo something back. So request.send, we want to send back a status of 200, and we want to send back the expected output, which was hello. So we save that, and then I'm using NodeMon for hosting, so it should be automatically restarted. But if you're using Node or something else like Forever, you have to manually restart it. But it restarts when I save it, basically. So when I look in our browser, I type the URL test, and I got an error, which is because I didn't use the version v1.test, and has no meta state. Yes, I spelled it wrong. Rest.status it should be. Has no method. Request response it should be, of course. Yes, and then we get the expected output hello. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to implement new endpoints. And what we want to do, we want to pull this logic out, because we don't want to have it in the definition of the endpoints. So if we want to implement a new handler, we open this folder, we create a new file, we call it test handler. And the handler suffix is just for, there's no logic with it, it's just for, so that everything has the same name. So save that, test handler, and then create my object, and then I module exports equal test handler. And on this object, I add my function. So test handler dot test me, we could call it. We create a function which takes the request and response, and res.status 200 .send flow from handler. So we save this, and now we need to require it in the endpoints because it's a new handler. So what we do here is we create a function called test handler equals require, and we want to require in the handler folder handler slash test handler. So that should be it, and we can now use this on our endpoint. So we remove this, and then we use our test handler dot test me was the function name, and we could verify that this is actually the name. So it was not, because I spelled it wrong. Test me it should be. I usually just highlight them and copy them. So this one is this one. So I save it, and when I go in here, the expected output should be hello from the handler, and it was not because the server crashed. Cannot find module handler test handler. So you couldn't find the yes, it's handlers. Yes, and now we get our hello from handler. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to implement new handlers as well, and you should pull that out to the handlers. And the handlers in themselves shouldn't have too much logic, but I don't know which kind of architecture that you want to use. So I'll keep that as simple as possible for now. And you could pull this logic in here. You could pull that out to a library that is reusable and testable. And this is probably the next thing that I will look into the API, some unit testing and stuff. But this is basically how you create new endpoints. And I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next tutorial.